comments or questions?
So we'll wait a moment. Good afternoon. I just want to say thank you to my colleagues in this body for continuing the work of the people of Minnesota. We have about 3 weeks left of this legislative session, and I am grateful to know that today we moved the agenda that we had planned to move. We're going to the Rules Committee. The Finance Committee will continue to meet, and we are going to continue to do the work that we came here to do for the people of Minnesota. It's been a good day.
Where are you at with Senator Mitchell's presence? I know you embraced her. How are you feeling about her work here?
Senator Mitchell is entitled to vote, and the people who sent her here from Woodbury, Senate District 47, are entitled to her representation. So I think it is important that she's here. I think it's important that she's voting in person, and that's what I've got to say about that.
Did she ask to vote remotely?
We've not talked about her remote voting at all. Nope. I think she very much wants to be here and in the chamber.
Can you tell us about the seat reassignment?
Senator Mitchell has in the past been sitting with Senator Kunish. Senator Kunish is a member of the Ethics Committee. And so to make sure that we are honoring the integrity of the Ethics Committee, we thought it was important to make that move, and everyone agreed.
It wasn't about an easier escape, as was speculated from the floor.
You know, the Ethics Subcommittee is critically important. It is the place in this body where due process is executed. And we want to make sure that that process has got lots of integrity. It's full of integrity. That committee has been called. They'll meet on May 7th. And Senator Kunish and Senator Mitchell both understand that it's important for the appearance of integrity and for the integrity of the process itself that they are not seated together on the floor.
What do you make of the efforts by Republicans, both on the motions and the dissent that we heard just a couple of minutes ago, and what that means for the rest of the session?
We are wrestling with fundamental principles of American law, of representational governance, and the criminal justice system. We are wrestling with due process, with the right of people who voted for Senator Mitchell and their right to representation in our democratic processes. So I can understand the Republicans wanting to make the point that they made today. But to be judge and jury, to ask the legislature, to ask members of the Senate to be judge and jury, and not allow due process in the system of ethics here and in the court of law would be undermining and abridging, really, and severing an important American value and the Constitution that we work upon. And I think Minnesotans would wonder what is guiding us anymore if we're not relying on those fundamental values and our Constitution.
To that note, I mean, the motions took 3 hours today to get done with a little bit of a recess in there. I mean, are you worried that this is going to impede your ability to get things done in a timely fashion this session if it continues like this?
You know, at this time of the year, in every session, the minority party uses time to slow things down. And I hope that, given that there are 3 weeks left, that we are able to come together as we did on the votes on the bills that we took up today in bipartisan fashion and finish the work that we need to do for the people of Minnesota.
Could you finish in bipartisan fashion if it's 33-33 and work with Republicans to pass bills without Mitchell's vote?
You know, it is our interest to put into law things that Minnesotans support. We're always looking for bipartisan support. Right now we have 34 votes. They're duly elected members of the Senate in our party, 33 votes in the minority party. It'll take 67 of us to do the work. 67 of us are here to do the work.
What do you say in response to the Senate minority leader saying this is an abuse of power by Mitchell and by Democrats to allow her to continue voting?
Again, we're dealing with fundamental principles here of democratic representation. And the people in Woodbury in Senate District 47 elected Senator Mitchell. They deserve her representation. We are not doing anything more than upholding the Constitution and the right of those voters in our democracy.
Would the next opportunity for Republicans to block her ability to vote again? Would it be like at the next floor session, or what would the next chance be?
That's a question you'll have to ask the Republicans.
Do the people of Woodbury not have the right to a representative who also serves on committees? Like, how do you square with saying due process is the reason she can vote on the floor, but we're going to strip her of her committees?
It is important that the people of Woodbury have a vote in this chamber on the laws that are being considered and passed by the people of Minnesota. Her vote here is important.
But not in committees or...
Her vote here is where we are taking up every issue that is going to become law, that could be signed by the governor into law. It is important that she vote here.
To the point of order from Senator Lads, you agree this was a proper decision by Senator Champion that this motion was out of order?
Again, we're dealing with fundamental principles of law, of the Constitution, of representational democracy. We should not be the judge and the jury. We should not be the head of the Ethics Committee or the Court of Law making a decision about Senator Mitchell and her vote. She has the right to vote. They have the right to representation.
But is it a conflict of interest for her to vote on whether she can vote?
She is one of 67 members, and we are working to uphold the Constitution and the democratic rule of law.
Could she have recused herself from voting on a matter involving her?
So again, we are here dealing with fundamental principles of law, of democratic representation, and due process. She has a right to vote. She has the right to vote. They have the right to representation. We should not be detaching ourselves from those values. We should not be suggesting that we should judge ahead of the processes that are put in place.
I believe it was Senator Drazkowski who said this could impact the fact that Republican votes are needed for bonding. I mean, are you concerned about that at all?
You know, the votes that come in the negotiation around bonding are always considered. I hope that the people of Minnesota's interests are served in the bonding bill, and that we do the work of the people of Minnesota, and we remember that we're here operating on the foundation of our Constitution and democratic rule of law.
Leader Murphy?
To pass any of the 3 gun bills on the floor in the House today? Are there votes for any of those bills to pass the Senate at this point? Safe storage, reporting, and Strasburg deserves.
So I know that Senator Gustafson has done a tremendous amount of work, particularly on safe storage, as she likes to say. That is legislation that will keep children from killing other children. It's a really important body of work. Glad the House is taking it up. I hope we take it up as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very, very much.
Erin, do you think at this May 7th meeting of the Ethics Subcommittee, will they actually take testimony or just be meeting and talking?
I don't have a say, nor do I have any reach into the Ethics Committee.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I put the mic down because he already said last question.
He's coming over here.
He's coming over here.
If I get a text that Rules Committee is starting, I'm going to have to pull them. So we'll try and get started.
Talk fast? Yeah. Okay, Peter, we'll do that. One thing I want to address right away off the bat is the same scrum that we had last week. I said that Senator Mitchell can vote. She can vote on the floor. The question Minnesotans are asking, should she be voting on the floor? Today we try to address that. Senate Republicans do not believe that she should be voting on the floor. This is a cloud over the top of the Senate right now, and what needs to be figured out through the subcommittee on ethics. And that's what we want to do, and we continue to try to push that. And until that happens, we don't believe that she should be voting on the floor, and that's what we try to do today through our motions throughout the morning. And then we got to the end here. You saw that Senator Mitchell's vote again impacted the outcome of the omnibus bill on jobs. And so we put up a protest on that, just signifying that that was wrong. We don't believe that should have happened, and yet she still continued to vote.
Will you withhold votes for a bonding bill if this continues, if she continues to be allowed to vote?
Right now, we've got to get together as the 4 leaders of our caucuses across this legislature and figure that out right now. That's something that we've been having background communications on, but yeah, it's all part of the communication.
But that is part of the danger for Democrats if they continue down this path. Is that accurate?
Look, we're going to figure this out going forward. Bonding bill is always part of the end deal, so we'll see where that ends up.
Going forward, is every day going to include these protests, or did you do everything today?
Well, I think until we can get the subcommittee on ethics and we can get some answers to Minnesotans, we're going to be asking those questions day in and day out, trying to figure out whether Minnesotans believe that they should be voting on, Senator Mitchell should be voting on the floor. Today you saw Democrats side with Senator Mitchell, who, by the way, has been charged with first-degree burglary. She is making the deciding votes. She made the deciding vote on whether she should be voting today on the floor. I hope you saw the irony in that. To me, that was pretty extreme to allow her to even vote on that one.
Should we expect more motions like the ones we saw today in future sessions?
You know, the legislature has a lot of different avenues for addressing these issues. We will continue to bring that up on the floor. Motions may be one, but there's other ways of doing that as well.
When would be the next chance that Republicans would try to block Mitchell from voting? Would it be at the next Senate floor session?
I think what we're going to be doing is just assessing that as a caucus going forward here on where there are the opportunities to ask those questions to the body. You know, we've got the right, as you saw through our rules debate. I know a lot of people started glassing over when we got into that, but it's very, very important. You know, once we get into the rules on when, you know, you can remove that vote, when you can't, we've got the ability to do that as a body. The legal process will take care of itself, but remember, we have the opportunity and we should be keeping the integrity of our institution, and that's what we tried to do today.
So what will change if probable cause is found next Tuesday to further the investigation? Will that change the dynamics?
Well, I certainly hope so. You know, I hope that the votes that you saw today on the floor will change once they see the probable cause. I think most Minnesotans, when you look at the police report, when you see the comments made by Senator Mitchell, I think there's probable cause, and I think in public court, you know, of the outside, I think they see that. You know, we will be assessing that. We'll be pushing that forward next week.
What about a possible recall effort in her district? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I've heard about that a little bit, and you know, that's up to her constituents to decide, and that movement, as I understand, is going forward.
But you're convinced that the current rules of the Senate, absent action by the ethics subcommittee, would allow you to remove her ability to vote. You're convinced that's possible?
The body can regulate itself, yes. So we would be able to remove her from the chamber, or at least not allow her to vote.
What about the DFL argument? I mean, we heard some discourse on the floor, but what about the DFL argument that it's disenfranchising her district?
Well, if you recall, they removed her, or tried to remove her, from committees, which, by the way, very few of them are meeting right now. And then they also removed her from the caucus meetings, not the caucus itself, but the caucus meetings. And so if you want to talk about disenfranchising or whatever, I mean, they've already done some of that by themselves. They acknowledge the seriousness of the situation, and they're moving down that pathway. There is, you know, to us, this is something that we need to look at the integrity of the institution. In disenfranchising, you know, the state by having this cloud hang over the Minnesota Senate.
What's the earliest date that the ethics committee could make a decision?
You know, that's up to the ethics committee and how they proceed on that as well. So, okay.
Because probable cause is just the first part. Then there has to be a deeper investigation,
Absolutely.
right? So that can take a long time.
Yep. So I've got to run down to Rules Committee. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Rachel, you need to put...
Tune in. This, no, but maybe some other stuff.
Rachel, you want to stay
Yes, I'll help him. He's making sure. I need to figure out. I'm just hoping if I can ask him.